The Ospedali degli Innocenti, Hospitals of the Innocents, also known in Old Tuscan dialect as the Spedali degli Innocenti, is a historical building in Florence, central Italy, designed by Filippo Brunelleschi, who received the commission in 1419. It was originally a child's orphanage. It is regarded as a notable example of early Italian Renaissance architecture. The hospital, which features a 9-bay loggia facing the Piazza SS Annunziata, was built and managed by the Arte della Seta, or Silk Guild of Florence. That guild was one of the wealthiest in the city, and like most guilds, took upon itself philanthropic duties. The facade is made up of 9 semicircular arches springing from columns of the composite order. The semicircular windows brings the building down earthbound and is a revival of the classical style, no longer a pointed arch. Whoever wrote that. So for a while, the Gothic arches were pointed. The Gothic arches are pointed, whereas the classical arches are circular. So the Renaissance was in part a return to the Roman style of architecture as opposed to the Gothic style of architecture. So they brought back the rounded arches, and it doesn't seem like a big deal now, but this was like the first building with rounded arches for a long time. Like for a long time people were just building Gothic buildings, and Brunelleschi was this is one of the first, I think it was the first building to bring back the rounded arches. And anyway, what are we up to? In the spandrels of the arches there are glazed blue terracotta roundels with reliefs of babies designed by Andrea della Robbia, suggesting the function of the building. There is an emphasis on the horizontal because the building is longer than it is tall. Who wrote this? Above each semicircular arch is a tabernacle window, a rectangular window with a triangular pediment on the top. The clean and clear sense of proportion is reflected in the building. The height of the columns is the same width of the intercolumnation, and the width of the arcade is equal to the height of the column, making each bay a cube. Some undergraduate architecture student wrote this, because it's just really awkward. The simple proportions of the building reflect a new age of secular education and a sense of great order and clarity. Yeah. Okay, that means somebody needs to. I mean, this is like when you study Renaissance architecture, this is like the first building you come across, because it's like the first Renaissance building. It's the first return to the they're talking about like a square module for the plan, and kind of like a cube for each module of the bay of the loggia, each bay of the loggia. Whereas, Gothic plans are much more complex. Gothic architecture is based on engineering, based on creating these arches that hold up these tall stone columns and roofs and ceilings and arches and flying buttresses and whatnot. Whereas Renaissance architecture is more mathematical. It's not architecture for the sake of holding up the building. It's more architecture for the sake of creating a rhythm and a clear plan, as it were. That's what it's trying to say. Also, half the height of the column is the height of the entablature, which is appropriate for a clear-minded society. No, come on, bro. This is first-year architecture stuff. Come on. Like you see, they're just kind of jumping to conclusions. They're just kind of writing down these catchphrases without actually stringing together an argument. It's just a bad essay. Children were sometimes abandoned in a basin which was located at the front portico. However, this basin was removed in 1660 and replaced by a wheel for secret refuge. There was a door with a special rotating horizontal wheel that brought the baby into the building without the parent being seen. This allowed people to leave their babies anonymously to be cared for by the orphanage. This system was in operation until the hospital's closure in 1875. Today, the building houses a small museum of Renaissance art. Alright. Building history. The founding hospital was constructed in several phases, and only the first phase, 1419 to 1427, was under Brunelleschi's direct supervision. The later phases added the attic story, 1439, but omitted the pilasters that Brunelleschi seemed to have envisioned, and expanded the building by one bay to the south in 1430. The vaulted passageway in the bay to the left of the loggia was also added later. Since the loggia was started before the hospital was begun, the hospital was not formally opened until 1445. Okay. Brunelleschi's design was based on classical Roman, Italian Romanesque, and late Gothic architecture. The loggia was a well-known building type, such as the Loggia de Lanzi. Come on, this is like first-year architecture history essays. But the use of round columns with classically correct capitals, in this case of the composite order, in conjunction with a dosseret or impulse blocks, was novel. So too the circular. It's like, I don't know, I feel like someone's like copying this stuff from architecture textbooks and just leaving out important context. So too the circular arches and the segmented spherical domes behind them. The architectural elements were also all articulated in grey stone and set off against the white of the walls. This motif came to be known as Pietra Serena, Italian serene stone. Also novel was the proportional logic. The heights of the columns, for example, was not arbitrary. If a horizontal line is drawn along the tops of the columns, a square is created out of the height of the column and the distance from one column to the next. This desire for regularity and geometric order was to become an important element in Renaissance architecture. Yeah, it is. It's just okay. The tondi above each column is a ceramic tondo. These were originally meant by Brunelleschi to be blank concavities, but circa 1490, Andrea della Robbia was commissioned to fill them in. The design features a baby in swaddling clothes. A few of the tondi are still the original ones, but some are 19th century copies. The insignia of the American Academy of Pediatrics is based on one of the tondi. Okay. Piazza Santissima Annunziata. The founding hospital defines the eastern side of the Piazza Santissima Annunziata. The other two principal facades of which were built later to imitate Brunelleschi's loggia. The piazza was not designed by Brunelleschi, as it is sometimes reported in guidebooks. The west facade, the Loggia di Servi di Maria, was designed by Antonio da Sangallo the Elder in the 1520s. It was built for the merchant order, the Servi di Maria, but is today a hotel. The north side of the piazza is defined by the Basilica della Santissima Annunziata, the Basilica of the Most Holy Annunciation. Although the building is much older, the facade was added in 1601 by the architect Giovanni Battista Caccini. The equestrian statue of Ferdinand I of Tuscany was made by the noted sculptor Gambologna, pseudonym for Jean de Bologna, and placed there in 1608. The fountain was added in 1640. Okay. History of the hospital. The Ospedale degli Innocenti was a charity institution that was responsible for the welfare of abandoned children. It represented social and humanistic values of Florence during the early Renaissance. It can also explain how investors use Florence's charitable institutions as saving banks. A relationship between charity and Italian city-states can be depicted by using the Innocenti as a case study. Oh, come on. This is like first-year university essays. You can't just do that in Wikipedia, man. Furthermore, the hospital remains as a significant place with a statement of compassion and care besides its unpleasant downfalls. Like, he's just talking about stuff and leaving out context and stuff like that. The Innocenti was responsible for the care of abandoned children and provided them with the ability to rejoin society. The first infant abandoned was on February the 5th, 1445, 10 days after opening. Babies were received, wet-nursed, and weaned. Masters were hired to teach reading and writing to the boys. Boys were taught skills according to their abilities. Girls were considered to be the weaker sex, fragile and most vulnerable. Come on, you don't need to make it. We know, this is like this is medieval Europe, all right. The fact that the girls were allowed to live is good enough. They were sent to mistresses who taught them how to sew, cook, and other occupations expected for women. The hospital provided dowries for the girls. That's amazing. They actually gave them money to get married, and they had the option of getting married or become nuns. In the late 1520s, an extension was built to the south along the Via di Fabii. This was intentionally for women who did not marry or become a nun. So what did they do? Nothing. They stayed there. In 1552, Don Vincenzo Borghini was appointed Spendaglino superintendent of the Innocenti. He was employed by Cosimo de' Medici, Grand Duke of Tuscany. Borghini's education as a Benedictine monk molded the lives of the children in the hospital. Borghini, after 5 months of becoming superintendent, wanted to get hold of the hospital's operae to eliminate wet nurses who defrauded the hospital. One of the main issues was that wet nursing increased the number of pregnancy. Some would resort to feeding their infants with cow or goat's milk. Mothers would sometimes abandon their own children to feed a child from the hospital. Others would even abandon their own children at the Innocenti, get hired as a wet nurse, and end up feeding their own child with pay. There was also continuation of salary from the hospital after the death of an infant. That's so terrible. They're like using their own children to scam money off the orphanage. It's crazy. There were 3 major years of Great Famine, 1556 to 57, 1567 and 1569 to 70. This was due to an imbalance between population and agricultural capacity. It was very difficult to reduce costs while balancing high emissions. During the 16th century, an increase in population impacted the Innocenti as well as high wheat prices. In 1557, there were also problems with maintaining supplies of grain since flooding occurred at the Innocenti storehouse. Why is that important? The hospital suffered from financial debt. The main problem was trying to balance the expenses and revenues. Cosimo and Francesco had an unstable organization between private charity and finance and constantly withdrew money. They had used the Innocenti as their personal charitable institution savings bank. The hospital's debt increased from 300,000 to 700 lira. However, its annual operating expenses were minimal, 100,000 lira. It's not 7 years worth of debt. 75% of the hospital's debts were amounts owed to investors. Okay. The consequences of the debt led to the dismissal of girls and boys. Borghini requested that the children be given high-status people of good reputation. Boys were dismissed at the age of 18. Girls were tried to be placed in notable families with increased dowries for those who wanted to marry. Women who did not become nuns nor married were trained for trade and manual labor. However, due to overcrowding, some were turned out from the hospital, forcing them to become prostitutes. Additional problems such as domestic violence and abusive relationships occurred. Citations needed. Yeah, thanks. This article is pretty bad. That article's just a mismatch of first-year university essays. But there's the orphanage, and then there's the other 2 sides of the piazza. So, controversies aside, this is a pretty fancy building here. So they're talking about this. So if you look at that, from the bottom of the column, actually that's wrong. Huh. Oh wow, they messed it up. So supposedly from the bottom of the column to the top of the column, and then from one column to the next, it should form a square. But they've managed to push that down, so it's a rectangle instead of a square. You see that? That's not a square anymore. Man, I don't know. I mean, you're supposed to recreate this building in the game, and then you just don't respect the one thing that made this thing famous, the one thing that made this the beginning of the Italian Renaissance, and you don't get that part. Oh, it's supposed to be a square. Like, is that a square? No, it's not a square. It's a rectangle. It's like a fat rectangle. Okay, well let's just stop. Let's just okay. Next building. Santa Maria Novella district. This district takes its name from the church of Santa Maria Novella, the first great basilica in Florence. Here you can find the city's great marketplace, the Mercanto Vecchio, which lies at the north end of the district. Okay. San Lorenzo. The church in which all the Medici went to die. San Lorenzo claims to be the oldest in Florence. It was consecrated in 393 while still outside the city walls. Michelangelo designed the inner facade, while Filippo Brunelleschi, the creator of Santa Maria del Fiore's dome, designed the layout. He died before the church was finished, and several of his designs were subsequently modified. Containing nearly 50 tombs, the Medici crypt was intended to house the Holy Sepulchre containing the body of Christ at its center. However, attempts to buy it and then to steal it from Jerusalem failed. Proving that bankers can buy a lot of things but not integrity. No, it's not integrity, right? No one's gonna sell you the body of Christ. Hold on. The Medici tried to purchase the body of Christ to put it in the church in Florence. Really? That's ambitious, man. Now that's ambition. Alright, so let's find this thing in the game. Where's the map? Where's the hold on, how do I get to the map? Here we go, map. So San Lorenzo is that one, I believe? Alright, let's run over there. We're going west. I don't know, Wikipedia is pretty cool, but sometimes its quality is suspicious. But I mean it's an open access Wikipedia. Oh, the interesting thing is like studies have been done to you know to assess the accuracy of Wikipedia, and interestingly, like the articles in Wikipedia, like the percentage of articles that are accurate or or inaccurate is about the same as respected scientific journals, which is like the number of errors, or the number of articles with errors in them, is about the same as respected scientific journals, believe it or not. Or was it scientific journals, or is it maybe it's not scientific journals, encyclopedias, respected encyclopedias. So the number of errors in encyclopedias that are edited by experts, the number of errors in those are about the same as the number of errors, or the proportion of errors in Wikipedia. So Wikipedia, sometimes the errors are quite obvious, and maybe that's even better. But just because it's Wikipedia doesn't mean it's less accurate than other encyclopedias. It's actually about the same. And that's that's studies, like serious people have kind of looked at just how accurate it is, which is, I think it's hilarious.
And the wisdom of the Arabes. Wellness awaits.
Alright, anyway, back to the tour. This is San Lorenzo, right? Yeah, there's a dome there. We can't really get a good view of it though, because there's no all the buildings are kind of tight around it. So let's get back to the front. The front is like the least interesting part of the thing. I think. Yeah, like the front of it is the least interesting part. But we don't really get a good view of the yeah, it's pretty boring front, isn't it? And then the scientific journals aren't perfect neither. There's kind of errors in those occasionally. What is this? San Lorenzo? San Lorenzo in Florence? No, that's may refer to. Okay, this is like a it's the disambiguation. Italy in wait a minute. Did I type this wrong? It's San Lorenzo, right? I didn't fail that bad. Now get to the database. Database? No, not secret. Locations, Florence, San Lorenzo. Error. Yeah, it's San Lorenzo. San Lorenzo. Oh, churches. My bad. San Lorenzo in di Firenze. There you go. Okay, found it. Found it, guys. Okay, so here it is. So the front is the least interesting part of the church. Aha, is it too tall in the game? It seems like the proportions are wrong in the game. Hold on, is it too tall? It is too tall. It's flatter in real life. Yeah, it's longer too. Oh wow. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Jeez. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yep, it was missing a bay, and it's too tall. Or rather, it's not. It's not wide enough, maybe. Like the proportion. Don't these guys get it? Don't these guys? Proportions are important. Proportions are more important than dimensions. Like if you make it the wrong size but the right proportions, that's better than if you make it kind of the right size with the wrong proportions. Proportions are important. Anyway, so there it is. That's what it looks like in real life. A bit more convincing than the one in game. The Basilica di San Lorenzo, Basilica of St. Lawrence, is one of the largest churches in Florence, Italy, situated at the center of the city's main market district, and the burial place of all the principal members of the Medici family from Cosimo il Vecchio to Cosimo III. It is one of several churches that claim to be the oldest in Florence when it was consecrated in 393. It stood outside the city walls. For 300 years it was the city's cathedral before the official seat of the bishop was transferred to Santa Reparata. San Lorenzo was also the parish church of the Medici family. In 1419, Giovanni de' Becchi de' Medici offered to finance a new church to replace the 11th century Romanesque rebuilding. Filippo Brunelleschi, the leading Renaissance architect of the first half of the 15th century, was commissioned to design it, but the building with alterations was not completed until after his death. The church is part of a larger monastic complex that contains other important architectural works: the old sacristy by Brunelleschi, the Laurentian library by Michelangelo, that's important, the new sacristy based on Michelangelo's designs, and the Medici chapels by Matteo Neghetti. The interior is kind of fancy. Like the exterior is just kind of rough stone, but the interior apparently is just marble everywhere. History. Though considered a milestone in the development of Renaissance architecture, San Lorenzo has a complicated building history. Even though it was built, at least partially, under the direction of Filippo Brunelleschi, it was not purely of his design. The project was begun around 1419, but lack of funding slowed down the construction and forced changes to the original design. By the early 1440s, only the sacristy, now called the Old Sacristy, has been worked on and the church was being paid for by the Medici. In 1442, the Medici stepped in to take over financial responsibility of the church as well. So the Medici was only paying for the sacristy before, but then it took over the whole church. Brunelleschi died, however, in 1446, and the job was handed over to either Antonio Manetti or Michelozzo. Scholars are not certain. Though the building was completed in 1459 and in time for a visit to Florence by Pius II, the chapel along the right-hand aisles was still being built in the 1480s and 1490s. That's not that surprising. By the time the building was done, many aspects of its layout, not to mention detailing, no longer corresponded to the original plan. The principal difference is that Brunelleschi had envisioned the chapels along the side aisles to be deeper and to be much like the chapels in the transept, the only part of the building that is known to have been designed by Brunelleschi. The building in Renaissance architecture. Despite its history, the building is seen as one of the great examples of the new style. Its more notable features include the attempt to create a proportional relationship between the nave and the aisles. The aisle bays are square, whereas the nave bays are 2 by 1. The articulation of the structure in Pietra Serena, Italian dark stone. The use of integrated system of columns, arches, and entablatures. A clear relationship between column and pilaster, the latter meant to be read as a type of embedded pier. The use of proper proportions for the heights of the columns, and the use of spherical segments in the vaults of the side aisles. There are significant problems in the design, however. Most, however, occur at the level of detail. Already Giorgio Vasari thought that the columns along the nave should have been elevated on plinths. That the pilasters along the wall of the side aisles rest on the floor is 3 steps higher than the nave. And on floor that is 3 steps higher than the nave is also considered an error. San Lorenzo is often compared with Santo Spirito, also in Florence. Santo Spirito, which Brunelleschi began somewhat later, is considered to have been constructed more or less in conformity with his ideas, even though Brunelleschi died before most of it was built. So there we go, that's a slightly better explanation of how it fits into Renaissance architecture. Outer and inner facades. The Medici Pope Leo X gave Michelangelo the commission to design a facade in white Carrara marble. In 1518, Michelangelo made a wooden model which shows how he adjusted the classical proportions of the facade, drawn to scale after the ideal proportions of the human body, to the greater height of the nave. The work remained unbuilt. Michelangelo did, however, design and build the internal facade, seen from the nave looking back towards the entrance. It comprises 3 doors between the 2 pilasters with garlands of oak and laurel and a balcony on 2 Corinthian columns. In recent years, the associations of Friends of the Electris Palatina and the Commune of Florence revisited the question of completing the outer facade according to Michelangelo's designs. To assist with the public debate, a computerized reconstruction was projected onto the plain brick facade in February 2007. As yet, no decision has been made on the project. The campanile dates from 1740. So, the front facade of the building was never built. Never built. At one point, Michelangelo was supposed to have built it, but he never actually got to do it. So that's why we got this kind of pretty plain brick in the front of the building at the moment. The old sacristy opening off the north transept is the square domed space, the Sagrista Vecchia of old sacristy. It was designed by Brunelleschi, and that is the oldest part of the present church, and the only part completed in Brunelleschi's lifetime. North transept. It contains the tombs of several members of the Medici family. It was composed of a sphere on top of a cube, the cube acting as the human world and the sphere the heavens. That's pretty fancy, isn't it? Opposite it in the south transept is the Sagrista Nova, new sacristy, begun in 1520 by Michelangelo, who also designed the Medici tombs within. The new sacristy was composed of 3 registered, the topmost topped by a coffered pendentive dome. The articulation of the interior walls can be described as early examples of Renaissance mannerism. See Michelangelo's Rossetto in the Laurentian Library. Okay. The combination of Petrus Serena pilasters on the lower register is carried through to the second. However, in Mannerist fashion, architectural elements seem impossible, creating suspense and tension that is evident in this example. Michelangelo's sculptural elements to be used on the tombs themselves was left undone. A difficult person to work with, Michelangelo refused to direct the completion of the new sacristy. Okay. The Cappelle Medici. The most celebrated and grandest part of San Lorenzo are the Cappelle Medici chapels in the Alps. The Medici were still paying for it when the last member of the family, Anna Maria Luisa de' Medici, died in 1743. Almost 50 lesser members of the family are buried in the crypt. The final design, 1603 to 1604, was by Bernardo Buntellanti, based on models of Alessandro Pieroni and Matteo Neghetti. Above is the Cappella dei Principi, Chapel of the Princes, a great but awkwardly domed octagonal hall where the Grand Dukes themselves are buried. The style shows Mannerist eccentricities in its unusual shape, broken cornices, and asymmetrically sized windows. In the interior, the ambitious decoration with colored marbles overwhelms the attempts at novel design. Okay. At the center was supposed to be the Holy Sepulchre itself, although attempts to buy it and then steal it from Jerusalem failed. Again, there seems to be bits of textbook or essays buried in this article, which is not very professional, but okay. So there's works of art and then funerary monuments. Unfortunately, we don't get to see the inside. It sounds like the inside is kind of interesting if you want to learn about the development of Renaissance architecture. But we don't get to go inside, and we don't really get to see much on the outside neither. So that's the north, that's the old sacristy. The south is to this side. And then the Laurentine library is here, is it? Is this supposed to be... Oh well, can't get inside here though. If I can find a way inside this thing. Apparently there's no way to go inside this thing. Unless I can climb this. Okay, what are you doing, Ezio? Okay, so is this the library? No, this is like the other... No, that's nothing special, is it? Anyway, there's the church. We don't get to go inside, but it seems like the inside is very interesting. Much more interesting than the outside, because the front of the building was never finished. Well, that's a shame. We don't get to see the inside of this thing.